Hello everyone, welcome to VHII's SlackBot Workshop. This is Amy.
And this is Kashfi.
So we're going to present today of our workshop tutorial. So let's get into it. Wait. Okay. So what is a SlackBot, first of all? SlackBot is just a robot in a Slack workspace. And if you've ever been to a Slack workspace, which you should, since it's linked in our webpage and we need that for this workshop, you would see a hello Slack, a hello message brought to you by the SlackBot. And what does the SlackBot do? It can do a lot of things. It usually common functionalities include like a custom auto reply, give you notifications, reminders, and etc. You can basically be creative and make it do whatever you want a bot to do for you. Some examples include like a reminder, like I remind Kashfi that we have this Slack presentation, and it also like gives you some buttons that you can interact with. So how do can I code my own SlackBot? For sure. A lot of people code their own SlackBots, and today we're just going to introduce how you can make your own SlackBot. And we would need the SlackBot API for it. What is an API? API just stands for Application Programming Interface. So you can think of it as a set of pre-programmed functionalities that you can just use. You can just call those functions to do whatever you want it to do. Cool. So how does the SlackBot works? Usually, if something happens in your Slack workspace, for example, if you send a message or if you click a button, that usually triggers an event, and that event would be sent to the Slack server. And the Slack, if you have a bot registered on that workspace, then the server would push that event to your SlackBot, so that your SlackBot program can do something according to the kind of event that it received. So basically, it serves as a server if you've ever done backend. And we have a graph here that basically demonstrates you click on something, and browser, which in this case would be the Slack app, would send an HTTP request to the web server, and the web server do something which includes the Slack server and also your SlackBot server. And then the response sends back to your Slack application, and you see it. Of course, you can do it the backend way, like all HTTP requests. But today we're going to use the JavaScript library to build our SlackBot. And that specific library is called Bolt, which we would go into it very soon. First of all, we will need to register an app. So Kashfi is going to walk us through how to register an app and make it know that we are using this Slack workspace.
All right, so we're going to be registering a Slack app. The thing we're going to do is we're going to navigate over to api.slack.com. And when we get there, we're going to click on the button Start Building. It's going to take you to this page called Your Apps. You might not have apps already. I have two, but we're going to make a new one. For the time being, we're just going to name it VHII because we're not really sure. And you're going to assign it a workspace. So just pick whichever workspace you have available. It's definitely not going to be the one that I have. So now that we've named our bot, we're going to navigate over here to the OAuth and Permissions tab on the left, and we are going to assign permissions to our bot. This is basically what we want our bot to be able to do and how much freedom and accessibility it should have in our workspace. So here under Bot Token Scopes, we're going to add some permissions for our bot. First one is called chat:_write. It allows your bot to send messages and channels. And the second one is commands. And that's going to allow your bot to respond to shortcuts or slash commands. In this case, we're going to be using slash commands for our bot, so that's why we need both of these. After we've determined our scopes for the bot, we're going to go up and we're going to install app to Workspace. And we're going to click Allow. After you do that, you should see this bot user OAuth access token at the top. We're going to copy that for now. It's going to be important later, so we're going to need this later. So don't forget where this is. It's in OAuth and permissions. So after we have copied that, we're going to go back over here and we're going to remix the Glitch project. So this is where we're going to start using Glitch, which is a server which is going to allow us to run our Slack app in real time. So we're going to click on this link, and that'll load for you a project that should look something like this. So once we get here, we are going to navigate to the .env file, and this is where we are going to paste that bot token that we copied earlier. We're going to paste it in the SlackBot token slot. Then we're going to navigate back over to slack.api.com, and we're going to go to basic information. And this is where we are going to copy our signing secret token. And we're going to paste it in our .env file next to Slack signing secret. Do not share these tokens with anyone. Okay, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to add Amy as a collaborator real quick on this app. And now I'm going to hand it over to Amy, who's going to teach you how to add your own functionality.
Okay, so now we're going to go to some actual coding. So we start from here. We finish the step of linking this app to our Slack workshop. It's time to add our own functionalities. Project 1. So as example, we would like to build a reminder bot. A reminder bot, basically, we want to allow user to give us a time in the future and also a custom message that they want to see. And we're going to post it at the specific time that they want. As a general step, like whenever you build a Slack bot, you need to first know what you want, which is our first line of our requirement. Second is to find an available web API method that works pretty well with what you want to do. And third is to code up the functionality, and then we're going to do some testing and debug. Okay, so let's first go to Slack.api. If you go to your apps, you should be able to see. So now, because I'm added as a collaborator, I can see VHII now. Just opening up here so that I can reference it later. Additionally, we would like to go to Slack.api, which is api.slack, which is our starting point. And this time, we're going to use something called chat schedule message. So if we just search for like scheduling a message, we see the first one popping up is web API method. And we click on it, and this is the homepage of this method that we want to use. So looking at the fact, what we need is a bot token. Token type is a bot, which is exactly what we added, and require scope chat.write. So when we're looking back at our VHBot API, we go to our OAuth and see that, okay, we have a bot token, and scopes we have chat.write. So we basically got everything we need. Then we can go into coding up. I already have a template here, which is nothing too much. I'm going to walk through what we're doing here. So as common header, I wrote up what we need. So it is a slash command. We would like to listen for pat/command. Wait, have we ever defined that yet? Not really, right? So we're going to go back to our app and see here's a slash command tab. So click on it, we can do create new command. And we name it /pat. Request URL. The request URL is exactly our, so if we go to our Glitch project and click on share, live app, copy this link, come back here, and do /slack/events. This is because we're listening for a Slack server to send us event messages, and this is how Glitch manage its URLs. So just put it there, short description. Reminder bot. user chain. We're going to name it, which I exactly have it here, /pat and time string, comma, messages. I want users to send me /pat and expect them to see some kind of time and put a comma in between, and they message. We're gonna see example of this later, so we're gonna ignore it for now and say save. This way we've created a new / command with flag, and now we need to actually implement it. Here, what I have set up is app.command bracket /pad async. So this is a command listener. Whenever you listen for a command, it's always app.command. And you put in what the actual command is in your first parameter. The second parameter is the async methods takes in environment variables, which in this case includes command, which is the commands associated, like the environment associated when a command is called, acknowledge, which is just a way, because SlackBot are designed in a way that if you don't confirm receiving 3 seconds, it will time out. So every time we do event listener, first thing we do is to acknowledge the receipt and client in context. So we're first just gonna console log to see what we would get from this. What we see from the logs. Okay, let's go to our actual workspace, which is Vanderbilt CS Works. See, we don't actually see our bot on the lists yet. How we can do it is we can either go here app or go here app and click on the plus sign. Then we search and we see VHII already appeared, so we just click on it and apply now. Okay, so here we can try to use our new / command. We just do like a sound message. It doesn't matter at this point. We're just trying to see what we can, what the event listener would get us from a user saying something. Okay, so we go back to our app.js, open up logs on the toolbar, and we see a bunch of log messages. The command is, what we're trying to see is that sound message. We see it showed up in command text. So we're going to note that down and have a local variable as commands equals command.text. This would be the user input string, and this is the string that we're going to pass to parse to get what we want. Okay, these doesn't seem very important, and a lot of other information. So we'll go back to it if we really need it. And after this, we would go into C. Context is that we have the bot token and bot user, bot ID in here. It's the context. And we see the client is a lot of stuff. We're going to go back to it later. So now we're going to the chat.schedule message and the arguments that we would need. Actually, it's easier to just copy and paste from here. So we're going to copy the stuff from here. We will do a const result equals schedule message. And we see that it builds the token for us, channel for us, text for us, and post at. So what is post at though? If we go back in here, in documentation, we will see the post at provides a Unix epoch timestamp of time, future sent to the messages. And what we want to do is we to create an epoch timestamp based on user input. And good thing for us is that we have a function. The JavaScript function of date.parse exactly do the same thing. So that create a time variable which equals date.parse. And what we're parsing is what they inputted, which is commands.substring everything before that comma. 0. And since we're going to divide it up, let's just make that index of its own variable. We'll do 0 through IDX is our time string. And what we're going to use later is their message string, which is text plus 1. So we want everything after that column. Cool. So the text is not command.text anymore, but instead we want to make it message. And post at, we're going to use, so because the data parse gave us a Unix timestamp in milliseconds, but we would want one in second in the post at. So we're going to divide by 1,000. Time divided by 1,000. So this is basically our function call, and it's going to schedule that message and post it back. Oh, sorry, my bad. So the time, what we're expecting for the time should be a complete time string in format similar. We can look at the documentation for data parse, but an example would be which this is a Unix timestamp for the startup time. So how we are use it is we're going to put something similar to this format in our command. Instead, this is July 5th, so we're going to do July 5th, 2020, and we're going to do 1536 CDT. Let's see if it worked. Okay, seems like it worked, and we got the response printed out. I'm just gonna comment out this thing so that it's not in the way. But a problem we see is that the user doesn't know if this message was scheduled right or not. So we want to have a private post to the user confirming if we got the request or if there's an error within the request. So how we will do that is there's a method called chat post scenario, which is here. Again, we can copy the. Oh, you might default to see the HTTP version if that's for some methods, and you would need to click here and show the JavaScript version. So what we're going to do is when we receive an error, we're going to also post a message to so instead of payload.channel, we're going to do command.channel. Command.user. Oh, as you can see, we just received our the message from our bot, which means it's perfectly working. Hooray! But we would still want to implement the confirmation and also error logging. So the text we're just going to see cannot complete your request, and also give the user some information of how the request should be like. Yep. Nice. So what we're going to do here as well is that if nothing happened, we want to also do private post. Instead of just logging a result, we would also want to do a private post, and it's not going to be a result anymore, and we don't actually need the result. We're just going to await. And our text would be, thanks, your request has been received. So this is what we're going to do. And let's test it out again in Workspace. So if we do the same message, which we would need to change the time since that 16 has already passed. So we're going to do it for the next minute. Meanwhile, we're going to test what if we didn't put it in the correct format, what would happen? So say I didn't have that comma, and I post it. Ooh, something's wrong with our app. Okay, we see an invalid argument because I didn't throw. So if, just to make sure we're always within index, so if index is smaller than 0, which means we didn't find that comma, we would throw, what should we throw? Added. We're just going no comma found. We're just going to let the user know the reason why they failed. Since we throw it here, we will be able to catch it and block the error. Let's try it again. See, now we got an only visible to you message saying, do not complete your request, error, and API error occurred, timing passed. To make sure it's in format. Exactly what we want to say. So we basically finished our first app. This is a reminder app that takes in time represented in a string and comma and a message, and we will be able to schedule a message for them and send them a confirmation and send an error log when it's not correct. So if we go back into the APIs available, we will see this is not our only option. And actually, there is something called reminders.add. And reminders.add, you can see this would post a reminder for you, which is a type in Slack. And however, it works with user and reminders.write scope. So if we want to use that one, we would need to go back into our application. In OAuth and permissions, we would need to add a user token scope, which is reminders.write. And we would need to reinstall app. And we see now we got another one, which is an OAuth access token. We will need to copy and paste this. Put it also in our end file. The reason why we're using environment file is because this would not be logged by version tracking like Git and stuff. So that's not publicly available. So if other people get your code, they still don't know your app credentials, so they can't send things as your app. I actually already have that code written, so we're just going to copy and paste that into our app.js and test it out. As you can see here, we're using still a command, taking in path2, acknowledging stuff. Okay, so we need to add a new command. It will be the same request URL. And user change is how this is going to work is I created it as /path2 and then add a user, putting a time, separate by a comma, and then a reminder message. This is important now. So we want to escape channel user links sent to your account. If you don't click on it, it will be sending as plain text. But if you do click on it, then you would get the user ID as a string, and it will be scoped by angular brackets and %, so that when you're parsing it, you can recognize this feature and get what you want. Okay, so this is for the app home. And we go back to our and make sure we have everything we need. So I used parsing. I set up several indexes. The first one is where the @ message starts. We expect them to be adding a user to set a reminder for a specific user. And the ending of that @ message and the dash, which would give you the part, like as you can see here, the first part, just the first part of this user ID and not the actual name on the right. So we got the user from that two indexes in username, in that name argument. So if we find an @ then we do the things. If not, then the username would be yourself. So you would be adding yourself. This is for visual. So username is for visual and user is for the program. It's for computer to know who to actually target at. Then we post a private message saying something was wrong, calling your method, and this is what you should be doing. If everything's right, then we post a successful message. We add a reminder and post a confirmation just like we did for last example. And if something was wrong, we again post them a private message saying, well, your message is not right, follow the format. Okay, now we can test it out. So we can do @2. For testing purposes, I'm just going to add myself. I'll say in 2 minutes. It's successful. And it says, reminder successfully set for me in 2 minutes. And in 2 minutes, I would actually get a message from SlackBot, which is the notification bot defaulted for all Slack workshops, workspaces. At the same time, I'm actually gonna send another message to Kashmi and hand this over to Kashmi, and she would walk us through the second example. A short recap is we did a command listener, acknowledge, and parse the result, just general JavaScript logic, and catch any possible error along the way, and send a private message to the caller. A challenge question to you all: can you let the user delete the scheduled message? And I also have a link to the possible way of doing it. Well, you guys can, which leads you to another API called delete schedule message. See if you can do that. Okay, if we go back here, oh, no message haven't appeared yet. But I'm gonna hand it over to Kashmi, and she'll let us know if our reminder bot worked or not.
All right. So with our second project, we're going to be creating a voting bot that allows users to generate group polls and channels. This project will be focusing more on the GUI aspect of things in that it'll be focusing mainly on modifying and sending interactive messages, creating modal views, and listening for button events. The tool we'll be using to build these visual components is called BlockKit Builder. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our glitch project, and we're going to click on share, then live app, and then we're going to click copy, and we're going to copy that link right there. Then we're going to navigate back over to api.slack.com, and this is where we are going to navigate to the Interactivity and Shortcuts tab, which should be under Features. This is an important step because if we don't enable interactivity, we can't send interactive messages at all. So we need to turn on interactivity. And then what we're going to do is under request URL, we're going to paste our glitch link like that. Yours will look different than ours. And then we're going to add on to the end of our link, we're going to add on Slack/events. Like that. And then we're going to save our changes. So the way we programmed this bot to work was by having it respond to two specific slash commands. One of them is called /new poll, and the other is called /close poll. So in order for our bot to be able to work and respond to those commands, we also need to go over here to this tab, the /commands tab, and we need to add our two slash commands that we want our bot to respond to. we're going to create two new commands. First one, /new poll, and we're going to paste the same URL we did before. And then we're also going to add on /event to the end, short description, create. And then we can also leave a usage hint for our parameters. So I'm going to put the question with the question mark. Perfect. And then we can save that. We're going to do the same thing with close poll. Perfect. So now that we have that working, we can actually go to our code. So this is our app.js file from earlier. We don't actually have time to live code all of the voting bots, so what we're going to focus on today is more of the user interface code, essentially the code that is actually printing and generating the interactive messages, the modal dialog, the buttons that can be pressed, stuff like that. So I'm navigating over to this folder because we made this folder in our glitch project, but you guys will need to navigate over to our GitHub repository, and then you'll go to the workshop folder, and then inside the workshop folder you should find the poll.js code, and that's the code that you're going to copy and paste into your file, into your app.js file, the way that I am right now. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So now that we've copied and pasted that, we can walk through this code. All right. So starting up here, we have our global variables. Most of these are self-explanatory, but I will go over a few of them that might be confusing. So the difference between the options array and the options views array. The options array is going to be the array that holds the literal option strings that were inputted by the user, like the literal parameter. So it's gonna be these strings, option 1, option 2, the ones that they put after the question. We're gonna put those all in an array, and then the option views array, we'll get back to that. For now, I'm gonna say that it's going to hold the actual option objects instead of the option strings. So yeah. And then our dictionary collection array, it's a library of user selections, formatted user ID to user selection. So essentially at the end, when we end up tallying up our votes, we're going to have this array and we're going to load it with every user who voted, their user ID, and the selection that they made from the poll. And then we're going to use that to tally up how many people made which selection and figure out which option won. And then this Boolean value is open just tells us if a current poll is open or not, because we need to know that when we're invoking the new poll and close poll /command. All right. So let's go over to /new poll. So this is our first command. This is our first command. So this first line, what we're doing is we're acknowledging the command request. It's not that much important, but all right. Here in our try-catch, the first thing we got to do is we need to clear the array with the selections and the user IDs, because if we're starting a new poll, we want to start with an empty array for that, an empty library. We also want to set is open to true for obvious reasons. And then down here, what we're doing, we're assigning the text that came after the new poll command. So we're assigning all of this text, the poll question and the options, to the variable poll info. Then what we're going to do here is we're going to take the global variable poll title, and we're going to get a substring from poll info, and we're going to get the actual poll question. So poll title is going to be this part of the text that comes after the new poll command. Okay, and then down here we have our global options array. So here we're just loading the user provided options into that array, and we're using the .split command to do it because we have commas separating them. And then down here, we will actually get back to this for loop. For now, I'm going to go, yeah, we're going to skip all this for now. We'll come back to it after I go over stuff down here. Okay. So this is the chat.postMessage method. So essentially what this method does, I do have the Slack API open already right now. Essentially what this, you can also navigate here if you want to, but essentially what this method does is it just posts a message, sends a message to a channel. So that's all we're doing with this method for now. What we want to do when we invoke the new poll command is we want to send a message to the channel letting them know that a new poll has been created and that we want to let them know what exactly the poll is, and we also want to make it an interactive message that shows the users all the options and allows them to choose an option and vote in the poll. So that's how we're going to be conducting this poll. We're going to send an interactive message into the channel, and users are going to click what option they want, and then we'll tally up the results. So in order to create this interactive message, we need to go to this link right here of BlockKit Builder. I already have it open, but once you do open it up, you should come to this page. It should look like this. So this is just an example template that they've already generated. Make sure you have message preview selected because we want it to be an interactive message. And then we're going to click clear block. All right. So what we're going to do now is we are going to add our method of allowing users to choose an option. So we need some kind of element that will display options and will allow users to select one. So what we end up choosing is the multi-static select element right here. And as you can see, it has a drop-down menu with options, and it also has some text over here, which we're going to use to let the viewers or the users know what the poll question is. So if we play around with this text over here, we'll see that if we change it to, let's say, current poll, it will change over here on our template or our preview. So I think I'm going to do current poll, put some Markdown in there, insert title. Perfect. So this is where the question's going to go. This is just saying it's the current poll. And then if we look here, these are our options. And they are stored in this options array right here. So for now, I think we're going to get rid of the last two options because we don't really need them at the moment. We're just going to focus on one option for now. So let's play around with the text here. Let's say if we would change this to option 1, then we would see over here that it says option 1. So that's exactly what we want. All right, so you may notice that there is a thing called value down here. While this attribute of the option object, which is what this is an option object, while it's not important to users or on the user interface side of things, it is important to us as developers because it tells us something about that option object. And what we want to know about this option object is which option is it. We want to know if it's option 1, is it option 2, is it option 3. The reason we want to know this is because when this option is selected, we'll have to get the value of the option object, and we'll need to know which option it is when we print out the poll result. So I'm assigning this option object a value of option 1 because that tells me which exact option that is, and it is option 1. If I were to add back the two other options, I would assign them the values of option 2 or option 3, but for the time being, we only need one, so option 1, that's that value. It'll be important later on when we tally up the votes. All right, okay, so next thing we're going to do is we are going to add something up here called an action ID. All right, so we're just going to pause and I'm going to talk about this for a second. An action ID is a string identifier for an action. Now, what does that mean? So basically, this is the interactive component in this message. When I click on the option 1. That is an action that is being invoked, and there is going to be an interaction payload sent back to us to let us know that that action has occurred. And so when that payload is sent to us, we want to know which exact action has occurred, because how will I know? So we give it an action ID to let us know what did the user do to generate this payload. So I'm going to call this action ID selected, because this will let us know that as a user, I have selected an option from this menu, and that will appear in our interaction payload. It is very useful for pinpointing the source of an action when it occurs, which is important when you're a developer, specifically. It will help us later on, and it just makes things a lot easier. Okay. Oh. All right, so now we're going to add, we're not done yet. We also want to add a way to add new options to the poll, because what if the user who started the poll forgot one of the options? We don't want to have to close that poll and start a new one. So it would be a lot easier if we just had a way to add a new option while the poll is still open. So first we're going to add a divider just to space things out. And then we are going to go down to Actions, and we are going to click on Buttons. This is going to be our Add Option button. This button is going to trigger a modal dialog later on. We'll get into what that is. And it's going to basically generate a dialog that will allow us to input a new option for our poll. So let's go down here, and this is our button code. You see here it's type button. All right, so if we were to modify the text on here and type in add option, we'll see that it changes over here. Now this button also has a value attribute, but instead of having that attribute, we're going to change this actually, and we're going to make it action ID. This is why having action IDs is important, because while these two interactive components are in the same interactive message, we need to know which action has been performed. So essentially, hold on, we're going to call this action ID add option. Okay. To recap, this is a block. This is a block of code, and a block in Slack is essentially a series of components that can be combined to create an interactive message. All right. So when an action is invoked on this interactive message, it's going to send an interaction payload back to us. But we need to know what exact action occurred from this message, especially when there's more than one interactive element in a message. So did I click the button or did I select an option? Which one happened? Because we want to trigger two very different responses to these actions when they occur. So adding an action ID to the button and adding an action ID to the static menu selector allows us to differentiate between these two actions. And it just makes things a lot easier, and it's a lot more identifiable. All right. One more thing we're going to do in this interactive code is we are going to add another ID, a new one called a block ID. Essentially what a block ID is it is going to, actually we're going to add that later. We're going to add it when we copy and paste it back into our code. So let's copy all of this, or just this. Now that we have our code on this, in our interactive message build, we're going to go back here and we are going to paste this code. All right. Now we're going to format this. Okay. All right. So we're back in our post message command. All right. We have our bot token. We have our channel ID. We need that because we need to know where we're posting this message. And then we have our block, which allows us to actually post the interactive message. It's the actual structure of the message. So we need to make some changes here as well. Like I said earlier, we need to add something called the block ID. So right here, block ID. All right, and we're actually going to make this block ID full title. And I'm going to explain why later. That might not make sense right now, but essentially what a block ID is it's a string that acts as a unique identifier for a block. And again, what a block is, it's just all this. It's the actual code for making an interactive message. So the difference between an action ID and a block ID is that a block ID is the identifier for the actual block of code, whereas an action ID is the identifier for the action that was triggered. So block ID is acting as an identifier for this message as a whole. All right. Now that we've done that, okay, so we have our post message command. Now let's go over here to our options. You see right here we have our options. So this presents a problem. Basically what our problem is that we need to retrieve the options from the options array that we created up here, because we are not going to know what the options are beforehand. We retrieve the options from the user input. So we can't pre-lay out our options in this method structure. We need to build it once the slash command is called. So what we actually need to do is we are going to take this code and we are going to copy it or cut it. Yeah. And then we're going to take our option object code that we just cut, and we're going to paste it right here in this for loop in this local variable. Perfect. Okay. So essentially what this for loop is doing as a whole is it's loading the option views array with option objects. And what we're doing here is we're creating an option object from an option string that we get from the options array. So let option view equal this option object. Instead of option 1, we're going to put option I, because we're getting the option string from the options array. And we're going to do this for every option in the options array. So we're just going to cycle through and we're going to load them in. And then down here, we're going to uncomment this code, this line of code. And what we're doing here is we're adding our newly created option object to our option views array. We're also going to change down here, we're going to change the value of the option object to something more like this. So, all right. So what we're doing here is we are assigning the option value to each option depending on its index. So the first option in the options array will get to be value of option 1 because I will be 0. And then basically we're going to do that for all of the options. So each option is going to have a value of option 1, option 2, option 3, and so on. Yeah. And then we're loading them into this array, this option views array, because that's going to hold the option objects that we have generated. Now we're going to go back down here to the options in the block of code, and we are going to type in option views, because essentially what we just did is we generated the same code that was inside here before. We cut it, but it's now generated from user input and it's not pre-written out. So we're able to insert it. Okay, we're also going to go up here and we're going to, instead of insert full title, we're going to add full title, which is the global variable that we made up here. Got it from the user input, the parameters. Perfect. So now we'll have our full title in our message as well, and we will have our options that we were given by the user in here, and we will have our button. So this message is done. This is exactly what we need to have happen. Yes. So this is all ready to go. This is all ready to be printed and posted into the channel, but how does it actually work? Because this is just a visual component of it right now. So now we're going to go down here and we're actually going to skip over this function for now. We'll come back to it later when it comes up. All right. So now we're down here to app.action. All right. So what this method is doing is it's listening for a button invocation with the action ID add option. Now that's the action ID that we assigned the add option button up here. So what this is doing is listening for that button being pressed, and then it's going to perform a series of actions once that button is pressed. this is where we are generating our modal view, our modal dialog. It's going to generate a modal dialog that will allow the user to input a new option. So here we have, all right. Once we get down here to view, you see that there's a function that we put here, and this is actually the function we skipped over earlier, and we're going to go back to that now. Basically what this function does is it returns, first of all, it makes a local variable called view. This is going to be our modal dialog view, and then it returns that view right here. And it also takes in a parameter, the parameter of the full title, because we need that when we're creating our modal dialog, because we need to include the title in the dialog. And we're getting that from user input. So now what we're going to do is we're going to construct a modal view, our modal dialog for that. So we're going to navigate back to a new tab of Block Kit Builder, and we have the same template. This time we're actually going to click on Modal Preview in the dropdown, and we see this. So this is what a modal dialog is. It is a pop-up window. It has a submit and a cancel button down here, and it pops up on your screen. You can also close out of it. So this is what's going to be essentially generated when we click on our button, or what we want to see. Now let's clear the blocks for now. All right. First element that we're going to add to our modal pop-up dialog is we're going to add a markdown right here to the section. All right. And we're going to change this to, again, we're going to do insert full title. We'll change that to full title later when we copy and paste it. For now, we're just adding in that. Okay, cool. We also want to mess with the title of this to make it something more meaningful and specific. So I'm going to go up here to title, and I'm going to change my app to new option, because this is the dialog that's going to allow us to add a new option. All right. Then I'm going to go down here to divider, and I'm going to add a divider just to space things out again. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to input, because this, again, is we're going to be taking input from the user for new options, string input, data. So under input, we're going to add plain text input. All right, so this is plain text input. As you can see, you can type in something, and then you can submit it. This is where they're going to type in their new option. So let's scroll down to the code for this. We look under input, we'll see label. We can change that to whatever we want. I'm going to say enter your new option below. Perfect. Okay. All right, so now we need to add some IDs to this modal view, because it just makes things a lot easier in the long run, and it allows us to listen for certain actions and for certain submissions. So first ID we're going to add is under elements down here. Under this, we're going to add a comment, and then we're going to add action underscore ID. All right, and then I'm going to call this added. Essentially what this is telling me is that when someone types into this box, when someone performs the action of typing into this box, the interaction payload is going to send this action ID added to let me know that the user at least added a new option, that they're at least typed something in. All right, and then we're also going to go down and we're going to create a block ID, and we're going to call the block ID new option. This is just an identifier for the block of code as a whole. Just lets us know that this particular block of code is dedicated to adding a new option. So it just makes things more identifiable, and it allows us to pinpoint the sources of actions. All right. Okay. Now that we've done that, we can go up here and we can add another ID. This is a new one. We haven't talked about this, and it's called a Callback ID. So what this ID is doing is it's letting, this ID is more specific to the dialog as a whole. So when you click the submit button, this creates a view submission payload. And in that view submission payload, we want to include a callback ID that lets us know that this modal has been submitted, that this particular instance of this modal has been submitted. So what we're going to call this this callback ID is option_submit to let us know what the modal that was submitted did. So when we do get a view submission payload, we'll know, hey, it was the modal for submitting a new option. Okay, so a new option has been submitted. So that just makes things easier to listen for. All right. Now we're going to copy this code Okay, we're going to copy this code, and we're going to paste it in our add option view function. All right, and then we're going to format this. Perfect. Okay, so now that we're here, we're going to take this text and we're going to change it to the full title that we get from the user input. All right, perfect. We have our callback ID, we have our text. All right, cool. Okay, so now we can go back down here to this command that's listening for the add option button being pressed. So down here, we are generating a modal view or a modal dialog from that button action. And down here, the view is add option view action.blockID. Okay, so action.blockID. So when this button is pressed, that is an action. We're accessing the block ID of that action. So basically, we're accessing the block of where the button is, and we're getting that block ID. So if we go back up here, and we look at this block ID that we assigned earlier, we assigned it to pull title. And this is the block of the add option button. All right, so basically, we're passing in pull title into this add option view because we do need the pull title to create the dialog. And that's what we're doing basically. So that's why we assigned the block ID to pull title, so that we could access it here and pass it in as an argument for this function. And so we could create that modal dialog with the title. All right, right here we're just assigning channel to the current channel because we need that later. Okay, next we are listening for a modal submission with the callback ID option_submit. Okay, so this is going to be triggered when the modal dialog is submitted. Basically what we're doing here is we are accessing, what this entire line is doing is it's creating a new constant called new option, and it's accessing the string that was inputted into here. Like it's accessing this string. That. So we're accessing it here and we're assigning it to new option. This is just telling us we're assigning the user ID. All right, and then here what we're doing is we're pushing that new option to the options array. And basically this is exactly what we had in the for loop earlier. This is the exact same code. What we're doing is we're making a new option view, this time with the string for the new option, and we're assigning it a new unique value for the option object. We're creating that option object, then we're pushing the new option object to the option view array, and we are, okay, and then here we have a new method called chat.update. Basically what this method does, if we go over here, it updates a message. So what we're doing here is we are updating the message that we posted previously. So when the new pull/command was invoked, we're updating it because we want it to reflect the new option that's been added in the static select menu. So what we're doing is, and in order for us to know exactly which message that is, we do need the timestamp, which we assigned earlier. We need the timestamp of the message to be modified, so we know exactly which message we are modifying. And then we need the channel, which we assigned earlier as well, because we need to know what channel the message is in. And this is just the same exact code as before, but this time it's with an updated option view array, because we pushed the new option to the option view array. Okay. Cool. Down here, we're listening for a static select menu invocation with the action ID selected. So essentially we're just listening for the event where the user selects an option from the menu. And what we want to do when a user does select an option is we first want to get that value of that option, which is what we're doing here. See this dot value on the end? So that's going to be the value that we assigned earlier. So for option 1, it would be like option 1 or option 2. It's going to look like that. This is what we're assigning to selected val. All right, and then here we are doing, yes, okay. So again, dictionary selection, like we said before, it's a library and it assigns every user's ID to their selection from the menu. So what we're doing is at the index of the user's ID, we're setting that element in the array equal to that user's selected value. So my user ID, my selected value. And we're putting it in the dictionary selection array. Okay, and then this command is our close poll. So finally we're at our close poll command. What we're doing here is we are acknowledging the command request. And then the first thing we want to do is check if isOpen is true, because we need to know if the poll is still open. Then we're creating a new array called dictionary results. And what we're doing here is, okay, so dictionary results is also going to be a library type array, but instead the format is going to be option value to number of votes. So here we're getting the option object values, those are going to be acting as the index, and then the number of votes. So in this array we're just creating all the option value indexes ahead of time, and then we are assigning each option value to 0. So we're setting all the number of votes to 0. And then in this for loop, for every user ID in dictionary selection, we are yes. So as we recall before, dictionary selection was formatted as, it was essentially, dictionary selection was formatted as user ID to option value. That's how that was selected. So what we're doing here is we need to go through dictionary selection and we need to get the option value. And then we're using the option value up here as an index for dictionary results. So this is just option value. Dictionary selection, user ID is just option value. Okay, so what we're doing is we are, so for every user in dictionary selection, for every user that has selected an option from the static menu, we're getting that option's value and we're adding one vote to that option value because that user voted for that option. And so we do that for every user, and and for users that selected the same option value, it'll be 2 or it'll be 3. It'll just keep adding on. Okay. This is just formatting the final result. This is the format we're going to use. This is where we print the final result right here. And then this is where we're again updating the original message posted by the bot with the timestamps that we have, with the channel ID where the command was invoked, where the close poll command was invoked. And the text we're using is formatted results, which we defined up here and we added to in this for loop. We added all the options and the number of votes next to each option. And then we set isOpen to false because we have closed the poll successfully. And that is about it. We've officially finished our close poll code. Yay! Okay. So now that we've done that, we can go over to this slide, the next slide. Okay. So we also have a challenge for you guys that you can try on your own at home. So can you modify the bot so that it supports multiple polls? Because as of right now, we kind of have a fairly simple and easy way of just making sure the polls are open and closed. We just have a Boolean that we set to true and false, but that really only allows for one poll. to be created in the channel. So can you guys support multiple polls in one channel, or perhaps many polls in different channels? Try it out at home. Let us know. All right. Okay. So right now we have our bot running and working. Actually, wait, one more thing. Let's try it out in our channel. So now we're going to go over to slack.com. We're going to go over to our workspace. And we are going to, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a new poll, yes or no, with the options yes and no. And as you see, it's created a new one. You can select one of these options, or you can add a new option. And this creates a modal preview. And I can type in a new option like maybe into this Modal Dialog, and I'll submit it. And as we'll see here, it has been updated and added to the end. So I'm going to click yes, and now I'm going to close the poll. And the results have been printed. There was 1 vote for yes, 0 for no, and 0 for maybe. So it works, and that's great. We'll also to let you guys know, Amy's reminders did in fact work. I marked them as complete, so good job, Amy. Okay. So we're done with that. Now, as for deployment. So we have our app running and working, but it's only being hosted in real time by the glitch project, which means if I were to close out of this glitch project and just end it, it would no longer run the way it's supposed to. So in order for our bot to always be running, we actually need to deploy it. So we need to find a service that can run the program 24/7. These services include Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, Heroku, ByteNow, etc. And you can learn more at this link. But we are not going to get into that today. And now I think I'm going to hand it off to Amy.
Yeah, sure. So as closing notes, what we did today is basically 2 examples showing you some of the functionalities of a SlackBot. But SlackBot API as well as Bolt, which is the JavaScript library that we use, is constantly being developed by the team. So new functionalities are being added. Like today we're using version 2.0, where it was version 1.0 like 3 years ago. So keep an eye out for new functionalities when you're building the app, and always adopt the best practice so far. We're always on the road. And bye. Thanks for listening.